Title of the next section is Solving Equations. Using distributive property. Again, we'll solve the equations, but this time we'll use distributive property, which is where you multiply inside the parentheses. First equation is 2, and inside parentheses 8 plus p equals 22. If you remember distributive property, we'll take the number 2 and multiply it by each term on the inside of the parentheses. In this case, we'll have 2 times 8, which would be 16, and 2 times p would be plus 2p, equals 22. Solving for p, we want to get rid of the 16. Adding 16, we can do the opposite, which is minus 16. 16 minus 16 would cancel. 2p would stay the same. And 22 minus 16 would be 6. Last step, we can divide by 2, and p is equal to 3. Second question, and last question for the section. Negative 4, and inside parentheses x plus 6 equals negative 40. And again, the negative 4 outside the parentheses, we can distribute or multiply inside the parentheses. Negative 4 times x would be negative 4x, and negative 4 times a positive 6 would be negative 24, equals negative 40. Solving from here, to get x by itself, we want to get rid of the minus 24. So we can add 24 to both sides. Negative 4x would stay the same. Minus 24 and plus 24 would cancel. And we have negative 40 plus 24. If we have different signs, one positive and one negative, we'll subtract those numbers. So 40 minus 24 would be 16. And you look at the bigger number, in this case 40 is the bigger number, so the negative stays with the 16. So negative 40 plus 24 would be negative 16. And last step, negative 4 times x, cancel out multiplying by negative 4. You can divide each side by negative 4. Negative 4 divided by negative 4 cancels. So the final answer would be x equals negative 16 divided by negative 4. 16 divided by 4 would be 4. And when you divide two negatives, the answer is positive. So x equals 4. A landlord requires first month's rent and half of 1 month's rent as a deposit. If the total amount to move in is $1,725, how much is 1 month's rent? Again, to solve this question, we can write an equation using a variable like x and solve for x. If we're looking for 1 month's rent, we can let x be the total of 1 month's rent. When you move in, you have to pay the first month's rent, which is x, and also we have to pay 1/2 month's rent as a deposit. If you're paying extra, that would be adding to your total. Half of 1 month's rent would be 1/2 of X, since X is 1 month's rent. So you have the first month plus 1/2 of a month, and that equals the total that you pay, which is $17.25. Solving this question, if we take 1/2, we can change that to a decimal. 1/2 is 0.5 as a decimal, so 1/2 X would be 0.5X equals 1725. To combine like terms, if we have X plus 0.5X, X, if you want to, you can put a 1 in front. So we'll have 1X plus 0.5X, or 1 plus 0.5 would be 1.5X equals 1725. Solving from here, 1.5 times X. To get rid of multiplying by 1.5, we can divide by 1.5. And X would equal 1725 divided by 1.5. Dividing decimals again, we can use long division. The top number or numerator goes inside, 1725. And 1.5, the number we're dividing by, goes outside. Keep in mind, when you divide decimals, you can have decimals inside the division symbol, but you're not allowed to have decimals outside. If you do, we can just move the decimal to the right 1 spot, which becomes 15. And 1725 would have a decimal at the end. If we move the outside decimal 1 spot, we'll move the inside decimal 1 spot. If we move past the numbers, we can put a 0 as a placeholder. So now we have 17,250 divided by 15. Dividing those, 15 goes into 17 one time. 1 times 15 would be 15. And we'll subtract when we divide. 7 minus 5 would be 2. And 1 minus 1 would be 0. Bring down the next number. So we'll have 22. 15 goes into 22, again just 1 time. 1 times 15 would be 15. And subtracting 22 minus 15 would be 7. And bring down the next number, which is 5. Now we have 15 into 75. If you think about that, it goes in 5 times. 5 times 5 would be 25. Carry the 2. And 5 times 1 would be 5, plus 2 more would be 7. 75 minus 75 would be 0. And we still have one number, the 0 we can bring down. 15 into 0 would be 0. 0 times 15 would be 0. So we'll have no remainder. And our answer up top, 1150. So a month of rent would be $1,150. Title of the first section is Review, Solving Equations, Using Distributive, Property. In this section, we'll review solving equations, and distributive property means we'll distribute with the parentheses. First question is 5 inside parentheses a minus 1 equals 35. When you have parentheses with a number outside, we can distribute or multiply that number inside. 5 times a would be 5a, and 5 times a negative 1 would be negative or minus 5, equals 35. Solving for a, we can add 5 on both sides. 5a would stay the same. Minus 5 and plus 5 would cancel. 35 plus 5 would be 40. And last step, 5a, we can divide by 5 to cancel the 5's on both sides. Canceling the 5, we have a equals 40 divided by 5, which would be 8. Second question, and last question for the section. 15 equals negative 3 inside parentheses 2x minus 1. Again, when we have parentheses, we can distribute or multiply the negative 3 to each of the terms. 15 on the left-hand side would stay the same. Negative 3 times 2x would be negative 6x. And a negative 3 times a negative 1 would be positive 3 or plus 3. Solving from here, the variables on the right-hand side, that's fine. We can just move the plus 3 to the other side by subtracting 3. 15 minus 3 would be 12. Negative 6x would stay the same, and 3 minus 3 would cancel. And the last step, negative 6 times x. To get rid of multiplying by negative 6, we can divide by negative 6 on both sides. And 12 divided by negative 6 would be negative 2. Negative 6 would cancel, and we'd have x left, so negative 2 equals x. Or if you want to, you could rewrite it x equals negative 2. Title of the last section today is Solving Equations with Fractions. In this section, we'll solve equations that have multiple fractions. First equation is a over 7 minus 5 over 7 equals 6 over 7. In this question, each term is a fraction. When you have an equation with all fractions or multiple fractions, first thing you want to do is make sure you have the same denominator for every fraction. In this case, the denominator or bottom number is all 7s. Once all the denominators are the same, or the denominators are equal, we can cross those off and ignore those, and rewrite the question just with the numerators. So we'll have a minus 5 equals 6. Solving from here, we can add 5 to both sides, and a equals 11. So when you have multiple fractions in an equation, you want to get all these same denominators, and then we can cross off the denominators. Second question, and last question for the section. M over 6 minus 7 equals 2 over 3. For this question, again, we have two fractions. What we can do if we want to cross off the denominators is make every number a fraction. So the 7 we can make a fraction by putting a 1 for the denominator. Before we can cancel out or cross off the bottom numbers or denominators, each of the numbers has to be exactly the same. If we have a 6, 1, and a 3, we need to first get common denominators between all of these. The common denominator or number that each of these goes into would be 6. So the first fraction, m over 6, would stay the same. The second fraction, 7 over 1, we want to change that so it's over 6. So we can multiply the denominator and numerator by 6. So 1 times 6 would be 6, and 7 times 6 would be 42. So 7 over 1 we can change to 42 over 6. Equals, and again 2/3, we want to change that so the denominator is equal to 6. To change 3 to a 6, we're multiplying by the number 2. 3 times 2 would be 6, and the numerator will multiply by the same number. 2 times 2 would be 4. So getting the common denominators, now they're all 6. All the denominators are equal, so we can cross those off or ignore them. And we can rewrite the equation just with the numerator or top numbers. M minus 42 equals 4. From here we can add 42 to both sides. M equals 4 plus 42 would be 46. So m equals 46. Title of the first section is Solving Equations. With decimals. In this section we'll solve equations, but the equations will have decimals. First question is 3m plus 4.5m equals 15. First step on this equation is we can combine like terms. Like terms again have the same variable and same exponent. 3m plus 4.5m would be 7.5m equals 15. And last step we'll divide by 7.5. So m equals, to divide decimals we can use long division. The numerator or top number goes inside and 7.5 goes outside the denominator we're dividing by. 7.5 we can change into 75, and if we move the decimal once, we'll move the inside decimal once and add a 0 if necessary. 75 into 150 goes twice,